thank you. My name is Muhammadou KAH. I was actually the previous Vice Chancellor of the University of the Gambia and was at other university in Azerbaijan and now in Nigeria as the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at the American University of Nigeria. Like my colleague from Ulayan Business School, I also stepped down as Provost about a month ago, and we are in the transition for my predecessor. Before I came back as a Provost, I was on the board of the university. So I'm from the Gambia and grew up in the United States. So thank you very much, Rana University, for organizing this very wonderful event, and I hope it will be many more platforms for us to exchange, interact, and share our experiences and best practices. One of the challenges of speaking last is most of what you want to say has already been said. All I can say is these are very unusual times, and it's not a secret, as has been shared by my colleagues, that COVID-19 have impacted universities across the board, and Africa is not an exception. As a matter of fact, it is more, or it is exacerbated in the continent of Africa because the public university system literally continued to collapse, and the private sector universities was a corrective measure to change the dwindling quality and lack of infrastructure. So private universities were filling a void. Proprietors and religious organizations have been addressing the lack of access and lack of quality of higher education, and we're doing very well. When COVID came, COVID exposed the lack of resilience and the weakness of the entire higher education ecosystem, and even the private universities that were funded privately, and one of the requirements is to have adequate resources. We were exposed that we did not have the requisite capital to sustain our universities in terms of chaos or in terms of crisis. So this was quite an eye-opening that impacted the system. So what was considered a secret that we were managing on the surface got exposed by COVID. Unfortunately or fortunately, because there are lessons that we can learn, that to do quality higher education requires quality investments and infrastructure. So that was one impact that I have seen. For our university in Nigeria, at the American University of Nigeria, we were privately funded that depended on a very generous individual. He has businesses, and his businesses were hugely hit and impacted by COVID. So therefore, the cash flow or the funding that we used to get immediately disappeared. So the impact was, it began, we, the leadership, had to look inwards in the university to see how we can sustain ourselves and ride the wave of the COVID. Sooner or later, we discovered that the issue is no more sustainability. As a private university, it is more of survivability because the funds are no more there. And we also got a hard lesson that we learned. We all depend on tuition. The fact is, no university can be sustained or survive in the long term with tuition dollars or tuition alone. And we can see the challenges we are all talking about. You cannot maintain a quality university and sustain it in the future, and for it to ride crisis by depending on tuition. So that is an impact that we have learned. We had to lay off over 400 administrative staff. We had a model where we were heavily dependent on expatriate faculty with very market salaries. Unfortunately, we couldn't sustain that anymore. We had to begin to reduce our exposure on the expatriate faculty. Now, when you reduce the dependency of quality expatriate faculty, which was part of your value proposition for parents to pay a higher premium to come to your university, when you have infrastructure that mimics high quality institution that requires operational costs that you couldn't have, you run into the challenges of not being able to meet your cost. So one of the impact is we had to rethink the entire value chain of our university. During COVID, we were fortunate that we are one of the few universities that have a superb IT infrastructure. So we were able to quickly transition fully to online virtual education because our faculty and students are used to learning that way. But that was not the norm across private university in Nigeria or in the region. So universities begin to be impacted for the inadequacy of suitable digital learning technologies and services to be able to provide quality delivery and learning engagement with their students. The challenges are many. The challenges include what my colleagues have said: access, affordability, the ability of lecturers or professors to effectively provide learning engagement experiences. We also learned that, yes, we will be moving towards the digital platforms, but the human element is quite important. And we have not yet figured out the best way to balance the two. Most private universities, this is the very first time they are exposed to this new world. Some of them have rejected it. Even our regulatory agencies in our countries have not embraced fully virtual learning or learning through digital platforms. But it was the only thing, and the only mechanism that sustained our universities. So they themselves, the regulator, are behind the necessary disruptions that are required during COVID and the new normalcy of COVID. So the challenges of inadequate digital infrastructure in our universities is a reality. The challenges of a pretentious cost model and cost structuring of universities that is dependent on tuition has been rebutted. The ill-preparedness of our learning community, both faculty and administration, to usher in this new wave that is here to stay is also a challenge. I will collapse what I have to say because I have a lot to say and I'm among the last speakers, but I wanted to frame what I have to say that, for example, what are the three critical ways in which higher education in our regions today must deviate from traditional and global practices in higher education? And how are we all prepared as leadership to champion these approaches? For me, this engulfs the challenges, it engulfs the impact, it engulfs the way forward. How do we keep up with evolving labor markets and employability of our graduates? These have emerged to be more pertinent today and in post-COVID world. And we all leaders of universities must rethink how we are going to respond to this and be ready for the fourth industrial revolution, as well as the havoc that we are yet to even grapple with. And universities' centrality, especially private university, is unquestionable. Secondly, we, the leadership in public and private universities and regulatory and custodians of our government education ecosystem, must urgently and immediately engage in substantive, appropriate digital transformation of the entire education ecosystem and the value chain. All our universities must rethink and have the digital technologies, learning technologies at the heart of our campuses in everything we do, not only in the pedagogical approaches, but even in our processes and workflow of learning and delivery of learning. And harness the opportunity that this has created for all of us, which is collaboration, partnership, and mobility of knowledge, academics, and students together, regardless of border. For me, that is the way forward, and any institution within our ecosystem that shies away will shy away in their own peril. I also talked about the importance of moving away from the traditional approaches of learning engagement and credentialing. Micro-credentialing is the norm of post-COVID. The mechanism in which we structure curriculum and programs urgently needs to be disrupted. I will provoke my colleagues that this 4-year degree with N number of courses structured serially may no more be what will give us the important learning outcomes and employability of our graduates. We have to rethink curricula, we have to rethink our programs. We have to ensure that while students are pursuing a degree program in parallel, they are acquiring micro-credentialing in channels of learning pathways and competences to enable them to be employable or to create employment. Because as we know, COVID have made a lot of jobs disappear. While we are being confronted with the fourth industrial revolution, the skills that will be required have to find its way into our curriculum, into our program structure, into our delivery, into the way we coexist in campus, in the way we coexist between traditional fundamentals and digital disruptions. We must augment and disrupt the higher education learning engagement model, its delivery, its credentialing. Lastly, I want to say, as we rethink and reposition for post-COVID learning engagements, quality, scalability, and achieving learning outcomes should be in our minds. Digital learning or virtual learning is the new reality, whether it will be wholly or hybrid. This in no way suggests that face-to-face is going away or is less important. It's just the reality post-COVID. It is still appropriate, and the human interactions and face-to-face learning engagements on our campuses will remain valuable and important in intellectual and professional development. No doubt about that. We all know that it is well established in the heart of research that students are comfortable reading course materials online. However, we also learn that the very same students who are comfortable with that prefer discussion and activities to occur face-to-face. How do we reconcile these two? So we must endeavor to create, to innovate high-quality virtual content that is situated in context, that is valuable, that is accessible, and that is shared by learners and facilitated achieving learning outcomes. To do that, Reina University, universities in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in India, in Africa, must figure out a way to have substantive collaboration and partnerships for us not only to sustain as private universities, but to survive. We must invest in appropriate digital learning platforms and services for all learners, and move away from it being just lip service or something that we talk about. So anyway, I will stop here for now, but I must say that this is very appreciated that Rainer University put this very important engagement with our colleagues and our peers together, and I associate myself with the earlier insights that were beautifully shared by all my colleagues that I do not wish to repeat. That's why I have to change my direction of thought to share a little bit of provocation on the disruption side of things. Thank you very much.